All right, everybody, welcome back. We're gonna do another reaction discussion type video. Today we're reacting to a video from Choy, so link to this video in the description. Let's get into it and subscribe to Choy.
The recent PTB has a lot to talk about, and most of it is really good. The killer is amazing, but one thing that is not getting nearly enough attention is the new surrender mechanic. Now, we actually tested it out ourselves on the PTB, and once you see for yourself how this mechanic actually works, you'll realize it's going to cause some big problems, mostly due to the lazy or at least short-sighted way in which it was implemented. Now, real quick to catch you up, in the patch notes when it comes to Survivor, you're able to surrender in two scenarios. The first is if all of your teammates quit and you are the last non-bot player on the team. And the second scenario is when all survivors are in the dying state. Behavior also says that when you surrender, you will keep some progress, specifically your blood points, match XP, challenge progress, and emblem scores, but you will still lose any item or add-ons that you have. Now, when I originally envisioned this mechanic, I thought it would work something like a voting system, right? Everyone still alive on the team has to decide if they want to concede or continue the match. However, that's not what happens at all. Behavior went about this in the laziest way possible. So let me explain. Surrendering isn't really a new mechanic. Instead, it now just lets you DC without a penalty if the right conditions are met.
Okay. First off, I feel like I've seen Choy's videos before. I know he tends to be very opinionated when it comes to a lot of changes or things that may be the case. I think he was actually... I can't remember if he's the same, if he had the video where he was talking about the Freddy rework is going to fail before it comes out. And I was initially going to drop a video about that. But then I was a little bit too slow and then the rework had come out. But anyway, to come out of the gate and say that it's a lazy change, honestly, to be like, let's really be fair here. All right. Normally, I would jump on the bandwagon and just like dump on behavior, but the thing is that behavior has been making a lot of changes recently and has at least been trying to, you know, better the game to some degree. I wouldn't say it's completely perfect, but nothing ever really is. But to come out of the gate and just go, oh, it's just lazy. It's like, okay, yeah, but like this is the first of its kind for this game. Like, you know, they probably want to just try out the concept in the first place and then work on that in the future. And especially adding the surrender mechanic in the first place is already massive because you already have a Go Next epidemic as it is. We already have a lot of people just with burnout and things like that are going to be playing this game. And, you know, it's just good to have more features, especially when a lot of games can really be drawn out when, you know, the game should have just been over already and stuff like that. Just don't think that we should just jump the gun without at least letting behavior, like, actually do some, you know, do some work, you know? If it's like 6 months of nothing, then I'd be like, all right, hold on, like, you know, that's a problem. Not saying it needs to be 6 months exactly, but you get the idea. Like, if it's a surrender, if it's only just a bare bones surrender mechanic and it never gets tweaked and it never gets added or never gets improved, then I can understand, hey, let's bag on them real quick. But we still haven't seen what could happen later on. You know, it's the first of its kind in this game. In this game in particular, it has existed in other games, but I feel like behavior is not really trying to necessarily copy other game developers in that kind of way. It seems like, and it just from what I've noticed when it comes to that, like they try to do their own thing, and because of that, it can cause a lot of issues. So in this case, I don't know. I would disagree.
Meaning a bot replaces you when you surrender, but the match continues on. Now, this might seem harmless at first glance, but the way this was implemented is literally going to change how DBD is played forever from this point on, and in my opinion, not in a good way. Go down, and then I want to see if I can, like, we can surrender while some people are slugged and other people are hooked, basically. Surrender. So you just basically free DC. I can't spectate. Does it let you guys surrender? It lets you surrender. So it lets you surrender on hook. On hook. Wow. Wow. That's not good, guys. They set this up in the laziest way they possibly could have. Yeah, you could literally just free DC against Legion. Surrendered. You sure you didn't just accidentally DC? No. It was very different. When you go to DC, they changed it now to where it says abandon, and it gives you this big warning of all the things you're gonna lose if you DC. When you surrender, in the top right corner, you'll see, if you rewind it, it literally pops up on your screen without even hitting pause. It says press the start button to surrender. You press start, and the abandon button is now replaced with a button that says surrender, and then you can surrender and there's no penalty at all.
So looking at the mechanic as it is now, I also like the chat says that like when people leave the lobby, which is cool. The fact that it is like at least now that I'm looking at it you know, for the first time, I would say that it's not that bad, right? We do have a going next epidemic, as people say. Me personally, I didn't really see it as that big of an issue, because it's just, you know, sometimes it's a little funny. But anyway, the leaving without a penalty, I feel like could help a lot with solo queue. I feel like, especially if you're like just running solo and you just got like you just end up in a lot of bad matches. At least hitting surrender, you can just move on to your next game without having to worry about you know, penalties and things like that, which can kind of circumvent some of that frustration when you kind of have to be stuck in that match forever. You know, which it can help in some cases, I think. I don't think it's that bad of a change. I think it helps the game feel a little bit more smooth, because we also have to take into account like the big changes here, because not only are they taking out knockout, right? So knockout was like one of the better options for, you know, not hooking and just slugging specifically. You're throwing in this new mechanic as well, so that if everyone's on the ground or like they're all just out, they can just be like, all right, cool, GG's, next. And you know, it seems like it'll be a lot quicker, and it just gets you to your next game a lot sooner, which I think can help speed up some matches and make it a little more fun overall, I would say. And what I mean by speeding up the matches, I mean sort of like when the game's over, you can just kind of like move on. You don't have to wait for everyone to die, or you don't have to wait for yourself to bleed out or whatever have you. You can just kind of move on, which I think can help a lot with just for time, you know what I mean? I feel like a lot of time investment goes into it, you know what I mean? So it's good to see that, you know, the mechanic is pretty good. Now, do they have more things to add on to it? Of course. From this base, you can come up with more things on top. Now, what would that look like? I'm not entirely sure yet. I'm not a game developer, but I would say it's not that bad. I mean, it could have been way worse, right? Which isn't a sound argument, to be fair, but I'm just saying, like, considering this is the first that we're getting of a surrender mechanic in DBD, I see why, if you compare it to other games, of course, it's like, yo, this is lazy, bro. Like, there's not even a voting. Like, nobody gets to vote. But the thing is, I think the surrender mechanic also, it just works, like, per individual, I think, too. Because if you're down, it pops up on your screen like, okay, do you want to surrender? Boom. End the game for you. You're like, okay, end screen, and then you just go, okay, continue, and then you just try to find another game. But like having to vote for it, like, I think would be more difficult, I think. And dare I say, add more toxicity to the equation, right? Because, you know, what if, like, let's say 3 of you vote yes, and then the other one's like no, and then they're probably gonna come after them, you know, no, considering the community, you know what I mean? They're probably gonna go after that guy, be like, oh, well, why'd you not surrender, yo? And then, you know, say, because I know back, I think when I used to play Rainbow Six Siege, and we had to, like, you know, there was like that option to vote to surrender, and you needed like a majority vote. You know, sometimes I don't think, like, sometimes the vote doesn't go through, so then you're kind of stuck in the game when it's kind of futile. Now, it also depends on when the mechanic actually kicks in, but like I've been kind of noticing, at least from my estimation here, it doesn't seem like it's that bad. I thought it was gonna be way worse, like the whole game ends for everybody or something like that, but no, it's just like, hey, I'm done with this match, GG's. I played it out, and then you still get your stuff. You know what I mean? It's not like it sort of circumvents the DCing entirely, because it's not saying surrender mid-game. It's saying, hey, everyone's down, it's over, like, you know, boom, surrender. You know what I mean? So it's like, I just don't see how this could be a negative thing when ultimately it's just saying, like, hey, look, it's already the point of no return, let's just all move on, like, let's get it over with, you know?
How did they mess up this system exactly? So it's a punishment for the killer now. They made it to where you, as the killer, if you, even in every situation, I think that's a bug, because I'm not supposed to lose my blood points. In every single situation, the survivors can DC now, no matter what. If the killer ever is about to win a match, the survivors can DC. You can never be endgame worried again. You can never, like, if the match is over, you just leave. It's pretty crazy. I don't know how they were this short-sighted, in all honesty. I don't get it. It's actually worse than I would have expected. So let me break down the issues here. First of all, hearing that you can surrender when all the survivors are in the dying state is very misleading. It paints a picture of all 4 survivors being slugged and bled out, and then the option to surrender appears on the screen and brings the match to a quick end if everyone, you know, votes for it, sparing everyone in the lobby a boring sentence of laying on the ground for 4 minutes bleeding out. However, the dying state, as they call it, counts as being slugged, being carried, or even being on a hook, meaning that survivors can now DC the instant they lose any match ever. And let me explain why that's bad for killer players, and also why it's arguably even worse for survivor players. Starting with killer, this means that there's basically never going to be another match of DVD where the killer really wins. That's because nearly every match is going to end in a surrender, because the survivors are just going to DC the second that checkmate moment happens, right? Here's an example. There's proof of it too. This isn't just me doomsdaying. It's very observable in any game that functions in a similar way. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a perfect example. As soon as one of the main objectives gets completed, the family will usually DC instantly, and on the survivor side, they DC the second they're about to die, or even when they're in an unwinnable situation.
You know, with at first, like, on paper, I was like, okay, this makes sense, this is fine. But when you put it this way, now I'm starting to see the problem. Oh, wow. Yeah, no, at first I thought it would be fine. At first I thought it was just like, okay, if the game's already done, you can just, like, as an individual, just be like, okay, I'm done here, everyone's dead, and then we'll just move on. This is instant DC without penalties, which is kind of insane, actually. It's actually kind of insane. Which, it's a bit of a red flag, because TCM is not a good example of what an asymmetrical should look like. Definitely, like, one of the worst examples we could use at this point. It definitely failed, unfortunately. It's been cool to have it coexist, but unfortunately it's just not very good. And having a DC like this is definitely going to be a massive issue. Which I think also kind of, like, as he mentioned, does take down a little bit of the... it does take down a little bit of the new changes they added, was for the endgame Mori, because, like, they're just gonna DC instantly. Which means you may... I don't even know if you'll... Like, he hasn't shown it, but I don't know if you're still able to get your Mori anyway. So this is a bit concerning, actually. I thought initially that it was just gonna be like a everyone's already dead, and then there's no way for them to come back, and then, you know, they just put them there. And I didn't know it was that lenient, where it was like, if you're on the hook or on the shoulder or on the ground, all surrender. It's like, whoa, like, what the heck? It's like, I thought it'd just be on the ground and that's it, or like everyone's dead and that's it. Or
the rewards also work the same way in TCM. You keep all your XP up until the point that you quit, so there's zero incentive to play out a match to the bitter end. As soon as you know you've lost, you may as well go to the next game. That's the mentality that most players have. And if you don't think that will translate to DVD players, you're kidding yourself. Now, I don't know how everyone feels about that exactly, but I truly hate it. It feels very cheap and it just degrades the entire game. Like, imagine if the killer was allowed to surrender or DC the second the last gen popped. That would be pretty annoying, right? At least I think so. Another huge issue though is that the killer can surrender now themselves if a generator hasn't been completed for 10 minutes, meaning behavior is unknowingly encouraging survivors to rat and hide for 10 minutes in order to get the killer to surrender, which is basically just them quitting from being bored and literally giving the survivors an undeserved free win for hiding. Like, legit, one of the worst aspects of DBD is being incentivized here, and it's potentially going to be a very big problem. How
The thing is, I kind of have to agree with Choy here. It's going to set a really bad precedent. It's really not going to be a solid change because of the fact that we already have I didn't see the whole picture. We already have a bunch of players here that are actively DCing instantly when they just take a hit. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are players here that will just take an M1 once and just instantly DC. Like, you go for a certain play, instant DC. They get downed at a pallet, instant DC. Like, they quit off of everything. Super burnt out crybabies like players, you know what I'm saying? So it's understandable. However, this is not going to be the way to do it, because you're basically giving people DC without penalty, which means games are gonna be a lot worse, you know? Like, on the long run, it's gonna get exhausting having games end instantaneously without even being able to play because you know, they decided to surrender instantly, which is basically just quitting on overdrive. And top it off, you also have the fact that, like he just mentioned, you gotta wait 10 minutes to surrender as killer if they're not on the gen or something like that. I think if it doesn't get completed in 10 minutes or something like that. So people already rat like super hard as it is. Me personally, I've gone against teams where I'll be doing well, I take out 2 of their teammates, and then what they'll do is just like not play the game. Like, they'll just hide in lockers or hide in the bushes or hide whatever for long periods of time. Like, they'll just do that, and then they won't touch the gens. They won't hear crows because they can just pick up and drop their items, or they'll just hide and find ways to circumvent the mechanic. And you're just sitting there, like, you know, because you can't do anything, right? Because you can't find anybody. You don't have aura perks, for example, stuff like that. Isn't a lot you could do. And I thought that behavior would have added a mechanic for that, right? Like, I was hoping that they would have a mechanic where it will reveal them. I thought it would be in this one. Like, this mechanic I'm about to bring up it would be really good to pair with this. If they don't touch the gens for a while, give Killer Instinct, right? Because if you give it Aura, you know, they obviously can counter it in some kind of way. But give it Killer Instinct. Give a notification like, hey, they're here, they're hiding, go after them. Here's where they are, and then you can push the game forward, because there's no reason that people should be just sitting there unable to basically go on to the next game. And instead of having the surrender mechanic, have a reveal mechanic for the survivors that are ratting. That would be the best solution for that, because it will reveal them and solve the problem. Then you'll force a chase, and then that would be able to solve the problem, I think. But to incentivize, like he's mentioning, which is true, there are going to be players and teams that are going to probably attempt to do this play, and it's not good, because they most likely will attempt to do that. They'll probably find a way to rat and try to get people to get the killer players to surrender, which I can't even blame them. You know what I mean? Because a lot of killer players are also very casual. I know there's a lot of casual killer players, so they probably don't even want to deal with that and stuff like that.
However, Behavior has said that they have a new anti-hiding mechanic, but we haven't been able to test this yet, and it's very possible that it's easy to bypass with, you know, picking up and dropping an item or something else. So the jury is still completely out on that. With that said, let me explain why this is arguably even worse for survivors, specifically solo queue. Since this surrender mechanic is available the second everyone is in the dying state, that means if, say for example, you have Unbreakable but your entire team gets slugged, your teammates can now instantly DC before you have a chance to reset the match. And there's a lot of similar scenarios like that. Deliverance, Kobeing off hooks, Soul Guard, etc., right? The game might not be over, but your teammates are free to leave with no penalty the second you get into hot water, leaving you with a team of bots. Also, if we go back to the killer being able to surrender after 10 minutes of no gens being completed, that opens the door for killers to be able to hold a 3-gen for 10 minutes, which is really not hard with the right setup. And if at some point the killer is losing that battle, maybe the anti-3-gen kicks in and blocks the gens from further regression, the killer can now surrender before one of the gens pops. So essentially, if they realize they're not going to be able to win with the 3-gen situation, they could just cancel the match for everybody by DCing for free. So with killer, it's more of an annoying problem, but with survivors, it's an actual tangible problem. Overall, you see how the laziness, or alternatively maybe short-sightedness, of how this was implemented is going to cause just a lot of unnecessary problems. And again, it feels like this is going to really cheapen the overall feel of Dead by Daylight. So let me offer a better alternative here. It's really simple actually. Make surrendering a voting system where every survivor left alive in the lobby has to agree to surrender, and when that surrender happens, it triggers the endgame Mori cutscene and the killer gets all of the blood points that they were sort of robbed of because of the surrender. This is a win-win for every.
You know, that actually is interesting to suggest. I remember that they actually had a similar mechanic, I think a couple of PTBs ago, where if everyone got downed, it would just instantly go to a cutscene. So maybe they can implement something like that after the vote, which is, that does make sense. Not bad. All right, Choy, you got it. That's not bad. It's funny how it went. I went from like one view to the other because, like at first I thought, oh, it doesn't seem that bad, right? Because I didn't really know much about it or how it functioned. I just kind of figured, well, I mean, if it's just okay, you can just surrender it. It doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal off of the first impression. But then I'm looking at it now, I go, wait a minute, this is a little, I'm convinced it's a little bit off. I don't know if that's a good idea. Because I think it'll be much worse for Survivor, but I think it'll be really annoying for Killer. I think both ways it just isn't great. Now, I wouldn't jump and say it's lazy, but I would just say like, hey, it's the first of its kind. They may not implement it if enough people say, hey, we don't really like how this works. And maybe they can try to workshop it, because it's not bad. It just needs a little bit of a change. Make it a vote like he mentioned, or something like that. Maybe adjust how it works. Because I feel like instead of removing the constant DCing, it's like now you're like kind of like, it's almost like you're giving them DCing as a mechanic, which is really strange. And I don't know if that's really the way to solve it, to be honest. So I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Player involved. The survivors actually lose the game as opposed to just rage quitting without a penalty. Survivors have to agree to surrender as a team, meaning the game is actually over and nobody has an ace up their sleeve to play. In addition to that, the hiding for 10 minutes without completing a generator surrender should be changed to no gens have been touched for 10 minutes, and now will trigger the endgame Mori.
I was thinking something like that. I think I mentioned it earlier. I was thinking the same thing. Because I've gone against teams like that do that, and they will hide throughout the whole match and just won't touch gens, just out of sheer pettiness. Like they're just salty that they're losing, so they want to make it as difficult and annoying as possible for you as a killer player. Quiet Kills, I think, even had a video maybe a few months ago that actually occurred. You know. I was actually on when he was on an Xbox back in the day, and he got against a team like that. They just weren't playing the game. They were hiding all day long. There's nothing you could do about it because there still isn't a mechanic for that to counter it. And I think to further add on to the the gens being touched, I think you want to have both and then have it be like they need to progress like 20% of the gen or maybe 10% of the gen or something like that, so that they can't just touch the gen and then go back to the bush. Like they have to actually push the gen out. You know what I mean? Like hit it a certain point of the threshold so that it can, you know, actually be more impactful, because, you know, it could be the same thing with the items picking up and putting down thing, where they like pick up and then put down. They might do that with the gen. They'll just touch it for 1 second and then go back to hiding. Like, why not make it so that it like hits a threshold? That's how you can further add to it, so you can prevent this from occurring in the first place, or at least if it does occur, you know, de-incentivize people doing that.
The killer will then win and the survivors will lose, as it should be. Also, even in a situation where all the survivors DC, this will allow the killer to DC against a team of bots without losing the match as well, which would be nice and also fair. If it's not obvious, this removes that 3-gen scenario as well. If you look back, one of the main reasons that the original endgame Mori was not implemented back in the day was because of little things like slug races at the exit gate, trying to give the hatch to the last survivor, or even like a scenario where someone has unbreakable but the endgame Mori automatically triggered before they could use it. So with a voting system, all of these issues are negated and the endgame Mori will not delete the fun pastimes of the game. So this really is the direction behavior should go in with the whole surrender mechanic. If you don't agree now, I understand, but give it a few months and you'll
Well, he does make a valid point. As much as I would say I disagree, like I don't participate in the giving them hatch things and the slug racing and all this type of stuff. That's just not for me. I don't really do that personally. I don't really, you know, care for it or find it that interesting or fun. But other people do, and that should honestly be, you know, their prerogative if they want to do that. By eliminating that as an option, I think it takes away some of the fun, I think, for those people, which would be unfair to them. Just because I don't participate in it doesn't mean that other people shouldn't. You know what I mean? Because maybe survivors find that fun. Maybe they're like, they appreciate the hatch, or they appreciate like having a fun like slug race, like to them fun race to the exit gate. You know, when it's like just people messing around, yada yada, and by having this like surrender mechanic, it might eliminate that as an option, and it might take away those moments from those people. And I do think that would also be very very bad. That would not be good for them, and that would be unfair to those people. So I think they need to sort of like kind of workshop this surrender mechanic a little bit more. I think it's decent, but it needs work. It needs a couple things before we can really like land as like a good thing. So that's my takeaway. With that being said, thank you for watching. If you watched this far, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section about the new surrender mechanic. Because at first I thought I sort of understood it and thought it would be fine, and then as I'm being shown what it is and what it does and how it looks like, I go, wait a minute, this is not what I thought it was. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Follow on Twitch, support the channel with the links in the description, check out the original video, support Choy. Go ahead and sub to him. I'm gonna see you guys in the next one.